At around 4:30 in the afternoon, on an ordinary Tuesday, the ground beneath the city of Kumamoto in southern Japan didn't just shake, it reached the very top of the scale. Shindo 7, the single highest level on Japan's seismic intensity scale, the level at which it becomes impossible to stand, at which furniture flies across rooms, at which buildings that were not engineered to survive, it come apart. In an instant, the second floor of a shopping mall in the town of Kashima pancaked downward, trapping an unknown number of people inside, with witnesses reporting an explosion and white smoke rising from the wreckage. The ancient stone walls of Kumamoto Castle, walls that had only recently been rebuilt after the last great earthquake, crumbled and collapsed all over again. A train was thrown onto its side at a station. A factory chimney snapped. A hillside gave way. Hundreds of thousands of people fled their homes. And, by the next morning, at least 13 people were confirmed dead, with rescuers still digging through the rubble searching for the missing. But here is the part of this story that you need to understand. The part that has Japan's scientists watching the situation with a very particular kind of tension. Because even as the rescue operations continue, even as the country reels from the shaking, the experts at the Japan Meteorological Agency are not simply looking backward at the damage. They are looking forward at a single chilling question. A question that could mean this disaster is not the end of something, but the beginning. Is this powerful earthquake the main shock, or is it a foreshock? The warning tremor before something even bigger? And in Kumamoto, of all places on Earth, that is not a theoretical question. It is a question with a terrifying recent precedent. So today we are going to break down exactly what happened, why this earthquake was so destructive, and above all, what the scientists are watching for right now in these critical hours and days that has them urging an entire region to stay on guard. No hype, no fear for its own sake, just the real science, the real stakes, and the honest uncertainty of a country holding its breath. But before we get into it, do me one quick favor, because it genuinely helps this channel and I read every single one. Drop a comment right now and tell me, where are you watching from, and are you or anyone you know in Japan right now? Send your thoughts to the people of Kumamoto in the comments. And even if you are half a world away, tell me, have you ever felt an earthquake yourself? That gut-dropping moment when the ground turns to liquid? I want to hear it. And if you want to be the first to know the moment the Earth moves anywhere along the Pacific Ring of Fire, subscribe right now. It is completely free. Hit that like button too. Let us push for 5,000 likes on this one so the algorithm gets it to the people who need this information. All right, let us get into it. So let us start with exactly what happened, with the facts as we know them. Shortly before 4:30 in the afternoon on a Tuesday, a powerful earthquake struck Kumamoto Prefecture on Kyushu, the southernmost of Japan's 4 main islands, roughly 900 kilometers southwest of Tokyo. The Japan Meteorological Agency put the magnitude at 7.1. The United States Geological Survey initially agreed with that figure, then later revised it down slightly to a magnitude of 6.8. And I want to be honest and clear about that because you may see both numbers floating around. Whether it was a 6.8 or a 7.1, this was unquestionably a powerful and dangerous earthquake. The epicenter was located about 20 kilometers south of Kumamoto City, a city of around 700,000 people. And critically, the rupture was shallow, only about 10 kilometers below the surface. That shallow depth is a huge part of why this quake was so violent at the surface, and we will come back to exactly why in a moment. The immediate aftermath was chaos and fear. Because the quake registered up to that maximum Shindo 7 intensity near the epicenter, the damage was severe and concentrated. The collapse at the Aeon Mall in Kashima Town became the focus of desperate rescue efforts, with reports that at least 2 young women in their 20s were killed there when part of the structure came down. A tsunami advisory was issued in the immediate aftermath, warning of possible waves of up to a meter along the coasts of the Ariake and Yatsushiro seas. But because this was an inland earthquake, and not one out at sea, no significant tsunami materialized, and the advisory was lifted within about 2 hours. Across the region, the disruption was massive. Bullet train and local rail services across Kyushu were suspended for safety inspections. An airport runway was closed, and hundreds of thousands of residents evacuated their homes. Reassuringly, Japan's Nuclear Regulation Authority checked the 3 nuclear power plants in the wider region and reported no abnormalities. A critical piece of good news in a country that remembers all too well the nuclear disaster that followed the great earthquake of 2011, and the scale of the damage extended well beyond that single mall. On Kyushu, the shaking reached far and wide. A train derailed and toppled onto its side at a station in Yatsushiro. The chimney of a paper factory snapped. And in a reminder that earthquakes trigger cascading hazards, a landslide was confirmed on the flank of a mountain in the Shimabara area of neighboring Nagasaki Prefecture, with disaster relief helicopters dispatched to assess it, a stark illustration of how strong shaking can bring down entire hillsides, endangering anyone below. Emergency call centers were flooded, Defense Ministry aircraft were sent to survey the region, and rescue teams worked through the night by floodlight, pulling at slabs of concrete in the search for anyone still trapped. It was, in every sense, a full-scale disaster response mobilized within hours. Now, let me explain why this earthquake was so destructive, because it comes down to that shallow depth and what it means. When an earthquake ruptures deep underground, say 100 kilometers or more, much of its energy is absorbed and softened by the miles of rock it has to travel through before reaching the surface. But when a rupture is shallow, like this one at just 10 kilometers, that energy arrives at the surface with tremendous force, concentrated right above the epicenter. That is what produced the Shindo 7 intensity, the maximum. And this is worth understanding. Japan uses its own seismic intensity scale, the Shindo scale, which measures not the total energy of the quake, but how violently the ground actually shakes at a given place. Shindo 7 is the very top of that scale. It represents shaking so severe that even earthquake-resistant buildings can be damaged, where it is impossible to move, where the ground itself can crack and slide. So while the magnitude number tells you the raw size of the earthquake, that Shindo 7 reading tells you the human reality on the ground. This was as intense as shaking gets. And to understand why Kumamoto is vulnerable to this kind of shaking in the first place, you have to understand where it sits. Japan as a whole is one of the most seismically active places on the planet, perched at the meeting point of several of the great tectonic plates that make up the Earth's surface. The country accounts for a remarkable share of the world's significant earthquakes and experiences on the order of 1,000 or more felt quakes every single year. But the earthquake that struck Kumamoto was not one of the great offshore subduction quakes that Japan is famous for. This was a shallow inland crustal earthquake, a rupture on a fault running through the land itself beneath Kyushu. Kumamoto sits within an active zone of these crustal faults, the very same broad fault system that was responsible for the catastrophic 2016 sequence. These inland faults may produce smaller magnitudes than the monstrous offshore megathrust quakes, but because they rupture directly beneath populated areas and at shallow depths, they can be intensely, disproportionately destructive, right where people live. That is exactly what makes a shallow crustal quake beneath a city so dangerous. The energy has nowhere to go but straight up, into the homes, the roads, and the buildings directly above. So now we arrive at the heart of it, the thing the scientists are watching. Because in the hours after the quake, an official from the Japan Meteorological Agency did something that should make everyone pay very close attention. He urged residents to be extremely cautious over the next 2 to 3 days, and the agency warned that further large earthquakes may strike the area in the coming days. Read that carefully. They are not just warning about aftershocks in the general sense. They are specifically flagging the possibility of more large quakes. And to understand why they are so concerned, why they are watching this so intently, you have to understand the difference between 3 things that sound similar but mean very different things: aftershocks, main shocks, and foreshocks. An aftershock is a smaller earthquake that follows a larger one as the crust readjusts. Those are expected and normal, and there have already been multiple strong aftershocks. A main shock is the biggest earthquake in a given sequence, the main event. But a foreshock is the truly dangerous one because a foreshock is an earthquake that turns out, only in hindsight, to have been the warning tremor before an even larger main shock. And here's the agonizing problem that keeps seismologists up at night. In the moment, in real time, you often cannot tell the difference. A powerful earthquake that feels like the main event could in fact be a foreshock. And you may only find out when the bigger one hits. That is the invisible question hanging over Kumamoto right now. Is this powerful quake the main shock, the worst of it? Or is the region being set up for something even more devastating? And this is where the location matters so much, because Kumamoto has lived this exact nightmare before. Just 10 years ago, in April of 2016, this same region was struck by a powerful earthquake. At the time, that first quake, a magnitude 6.5 that also reached Shindo 7, was widely assumed to be the main shock. People began to assess the damage, to recover, to breathe. And then, roughly 28 hours later, a second, even more powerful earthquake struck the same area, a magnitude 7.3. It turned out that the first quake had been a foreshock all along, and the real main shock came a day later, catching people off guard. Between the two events, more than 50 people died, and the region was devastated. The famous Kumamoto castle was badly damaged, and it has spent the years since under a long, painstaking restoration, the very same restoration whose rebuilt walls have now collapsed again. So, when this new earthquake struck Kumamoto, the ghost of 2016 was immediately in the room. One resident, an official at a nearby town hall, said the shaking reminded him directly of the quake from 10 years ago, and that it frightened him. That memory is exactly why the scientists are watching so carefully, because they have seen, in this precise place, a big earthquake be followed by an even bigger one. They are not going to assume this is over. So, what specifically are the scientists monitoring in these critical hours? Several things at once. First, and most importantly, they are watching the pattern and behavior of the ongoing seismic activity, the aftershocks, their sizes, their locations, and whether the overall sequence is decaying the way a normal aftershock sequence should, or whether something looks like it could be building. Second, they are studying the fault that ruptured. Kumamoto sits atop a known and active fault system, the same broad system involved in the 2016 disaster. When one fault ruptures, it redistributes stress to the surrounding rock, and scientists work urgently to calculate whether that stress transfer has loaded up any adjacent faults, potentially bringing them closer to failure. Third, they are watching for any change in the character of the quakes, any sign of the sequence migrating, intensifying, or shifting in a way that might signal a larger event is being primed. All of this feeds into that central urgent question, and into the guidance they give the public. And here is something genuinely fascinating about how scientists approach this, because it is not guesswork, it is statistics. After a major earthquake, seismologists can actually calculate the probability that an even larger quake will follow within a given window of time. They do this by studying the vast historical record of earthquake sequences, hundreds of thousands of them, and observing how often a quake of a given size turned out to be followed by a bigger one. What that data shows is that in the immediate aftermath of any large earthquake, the probability of an equal or larger quake nearby is temporarily elevated, often for the first few days, before it steadily declines back toward the normal background level. Those probabilities are typically small in absolute terms, usually a matter of a few percent, but small is not zero. And when the potential event is another Shindo 7 disaster, even a few percent is more than enough to justify serious caution. This is the science behind the agency's warning. They are not reading tea leaves, they are applying hard-won statistical knowledge about how earthquake sequences behave and translating it into practical, potentially life-saving guidance for the people of Kumamoto. Now let me give you the honest, balanced truth here, because this is what separates real understanding from panic, and it matters enormously. The vast majority of powerful earthquakes are not foreshocks. Statistically, when a big earthquake strikes, the most likely outcome by far is that it was the main shock, and that what follows is a decaying sequence of smaller aftershocks that gradually fades. The scenario where an even larger quake follows, like 2016, is the exception, not the rule. It does not happen most of the time, so the scientists are not saying a bigger quake is coming. They are saying it is possible that the probability is temporarily elevated in the days right after a major event, and that given this region's history, it would be reckless not to stay on guard. That is a crucial distinction. This is not a prediction of doom. It is a call for vigilance during a window of elevated risk, a window that typically spans those first few days, which is exactly why the agency specified the next 2 to 3 days. After that, if no larger quake has struck and the aftershocks continue to fade, the danger of a bigger event steadily drops. And that brings us to what this means for the people on the ground, and what anyone in that situation should do. The single most important message from the authorities is vigilance in the immediate aftermath. In the days right after a major earthquake, buildings that were weakened but not destroyed by the first quake are especially vulnerable to collapse in a strong aftershock. So people are urged not to re-enter damaged buildings, to stay away from structures with visible cracks or damage, and to be ready to protect themselves instantly if the ground shakes again. If you are ever in this situation, keep your shoes by your bed in case of broken glass, keep a flashlight and a charged phone within reach. Know your evacuation route to open ground or a designated shelter. And if strong shaking begins, immediately drop, cover, and hold on. Get under something sturdy and protect your head and neck. Aftershocks can come without warning, and the ones that follow a Shindo 7 event can themselves be powerful. The vigilance the scientists are asking for is not fear. It is simply readiness during the most dangerous window. It is also worth remembering that the danger from a major earthquake does not end when the shaking stops. In the hours and days that follow, the risks shift and multiply. Gas leaks from ruptured lines, fires weakened structures that can fall without warning, and the sheer strain on hospitals, roads, and emergency services all at once. This is why the response is not just about the first rescue, but about managing an entire cascade of hazards, and why the scientists' guidance about the coming days carries so much weight. The first hours belong to the rescuers. The next few days belong to the watchers, the seismologists reading every signal to keep the region one step ahead. Let me step back and give you the bigger picture, because there is genuine reassurance in it even amid the tragedy. Japan is, without question, one of the most earthquake-prepared nations on the entire planet. The fact that a Shindo 7 earthquake, not the maximum intensity, struck near a city of 700,000 people and the death toll, while tragic, was in the dozens rather than the thousands, is itself a testament to decades of investment in earthquake-resistant construction, early warning systems, and public preparedness. In many other parts of the world, an earthquake this intense beneath a city that size would be a catastrophe of a completely different magnitude. Japan's buildings are engineered to sway and absorb the shaking rather than snap and collapse. And one of the most remarkable systems of all is Japan's earthquake early warning network. When a fault ruptures, it sends out two kinds of waves: faster, weaker waves that arrive first, and slower, more destructive waves that follow. Japan's dense web of seismic sensors detects those first, faster waves the instant a quake begins and can push out an alert to phones, to televisions, to public address systems in the seconds before the violent shaking arrives. It sounds like almost nothing, but those few seconds are enough to drop and take cover, enough for a surgeon to lift a scalpel, enough for a factory to halt dangerous machinery. And Japan's high-speed bullet trains are wired directly into this system. The moment the sensors detect a significant quake, the trains automatically slam on their emergency brakes, which is a major reason why, even with a train derailing in this event, Japan has avoided the kind of high-speed rail catastrophe that a quake like this could otherwise cause. On top of all of that, Japanese children drill for earthquakes from their earliest school years until the response becomes pure physical instinct. So even as we watch this situation with concern, and even as the scientists monitor for the possibility of something worse, we should recognize that we are also watching one of the most resilient societies on Earth respond to a disaster the way it has trained to for generations. So let me leave you with the honest bottom line, the thing to hold on to. A powerful earthquake has struck Japan, and it has taken lives and caused real destruction. Right now, in these critical hours and days, the scientists are watching one question above all others: whether this was the worst of it or a warning of something still to come. The ghost of 2016, when a foreshock in this exact region was followed by a larger main shock a day later, is why they are not taking any chances. Most likely, statistically, most likely, this was the main shock, and the sequence will fade. But most likely is not certainly. And in a place with this history, the responsible thing is exactly what the authorities are doing: urging vigilance, watching the faults, reading every tremor, and giving the people of Kumamoto every possible chance to stay safe through the dangerous window. We cannot predict the next earthquake, but we can watch and prepare and respect the uncertainty. And that is precisely what the scientists of Japan are doing right now on our behalf and on behalf of everyone living on this restless planet. We are going to keep tracking this earthquake, its aftershocks, and everything the scientists discover in the coming days, so subscribe so you never miss an update, and drop that comment I asked for at the start. Where are you watching from? And have you ever felt a quake? Because behind every seismic reading are real people, real families, right now living through one of the most frightening experiences there is. And understanding it is how we all stay ready. Send your thoughts to the people of Kumamoto. Let us hit 5,000 likes on this one. Stay safe out there, look out for the people around you, and I will see you in the next one.